3,000 people stood to applaud, yet I collapsed right in front of the microphone. The doctors said they needed consent immediately. They called my parents, but no one answered. Only my grandfather appeared, clutching an old envelope with eyes red from crying. Later, 87 missed calls from my father exploded on my screen, accompanied by a single chilling text message demanding that I not sign anything and call him right now. My name is Olivia Parker, and at 23 years old, I was standing on the precipice of what was supposed to be the greatest achievement of my life. I was the valedictorian of Lake Haven State University, a title I had scraped and clawed for through 4 years of double shifts and sleepless nights. The sun was bearing down on the football stadium with a vengeance, a heavy, humid Missouri blanket that made my polyester graduation gown feel like a second skin shrinking against my sweat. 3,000 people were sitting in the bleachers. The sound of their applause was a physical force, a roaring wave of approval that should have lifted me up and made me feel invincible. But as I walked across the stage toward the podium, my feet felt like they were encased in lead blocks. I did not scan the crowd of graduates in their square caps or the faculty in their velvet robes. I was looking for exactly 2 spots in the front row, the VIP section, the seats reserved specifically for the families of the keynote speakers. Seat 4A, Seat 4B, they were empty. They were just 2 white folding chairs baking in the harsh sun, glaringly vacant amidst a sea of proud parents holding bouquets and camcorders. A void where my parents, Scott and Diane, were supposed to be. I swallowed the lump in my throat, a bitter mixture of disappointment and resignation that I had grown used to tasting over the last few years. I told myself it did not matter. I was an adult. I was independent. That was the word they loved to use. Wasn't it, independent? It sounded like a compliment, but lately, it felt more like a convenient excuse for their absence. I gripped the sides of the podium. The wood was scorching hot under my palms. I took a breath, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. "Good morning, class of 2024, I said into the microphone. My voice was steady. It projected clearly across the field. It lasted exactly 5 seconds. Then, the world tilted. It was not a simple dizzy spell. It was a violent, catastrophic shift in my reality. It started with my vision. The bright blue sky and the sea of faces didn't just blur, they vanished. It was as if a camera shutter was closing rapidly around my eyes, cutting off my peripheral sight until I was staring down a narrow, terrifying tunnel of blinding white light. A sound erupted in my ears. It was a high-pitched whine, like a microphone feeding back, but it was coming from inside my skull. It grew louder, drowning out the murmurs of the crowd, drowning out my own thoughts. Then came the pain. A sharp, jagged spike drove itself right behind my left eye. It was so intense, so absolute, that I could not even gasp for air. It felt as though someone had taken an ice pick and hammered it directly into my optic nerve. My fingers slipped from the hot wood of the podium. I tried to anchor myself, to dig my nails into something solid, but my knees had turned to water. The connection between my brain and my legs had been severed. Gravity took over with cruel efficiency. I did not just fall. I crumbled. I felt my shoulder hit the hard deck of the stage, followed by the side of my head. The last thing I saw was the blue sky spinning wildly out of control, and the last thing I heard was the collective gasp of 3,000 people before a heavy, suffocating darkness swallowed me whole. Time became fluid and broken after that. I remember fragments, sensations, the smell of dust and floor polish, the feeling of vibration against my back as people ran toward me. "Olivia, live. Look at me." The voice was frantic, cutting through the ringing in my ears. I forced my eyes open, but the world was swimming in a nauseating haze. Tessa, my best friend since the 3rd grade. She was hovering over me, her face a mask of sheer panic. Her graduation cap had fallen off, and her dark hair was wild around her face. She was gripping my hand so hard it hurt, but that pain was grounding. It was the only thing telling me I was still alive. "I'm here," I tried to whisper, but my tongue felt too big for my mouth. The words came out as a slur. "Don't try to talk," she ordered, her voice trembling. "The paramedics are coming. You just went down. Liv, you just collapsed like a marionette with cut strings." I could hear other voices now, the heavy thud of boots, the static of a radio. Someone was shining a light into my eyes, and the pain spiked again, a fresh wave of agony that made me want to scream, but I didn't have the breath for it. The transition to the hospital was a blur of sirens and the sterile smell of the ambulance. By the time we reached the emergency room at St. Jude's Medical Center, the world had stabilized enough for me to understand the gravity of the situation, but the headache was still there. A throbbing beast waiting to strike again. I was lying on a gurney in a trauma bay. The curtains were pulled back. A doctor in blue scrubs, Dr. Evans, stood at the foot of my bed. He did not look like the comforting doctors on television shows. He looked tired, grim, and incredibly young. He held a tablet with an image of my brain, a grayscale map of my own mind that looked alien to me. "Miss Parker," he said, his voice clipped and urgent. "We found a mass. It is pressing against your optic nerve and causing significant intracranial pressure. That explains the collapse and the vision loss. We need to relieve that pressure immediately. We need to operate now. If we wait, you are looking at permanent blindness or a massive stroke." I tried to process the words. Mass, stroke, blindness. I was 23. I ate salads. I ran on the treadmill. This wasn't supposed to be my life. "Am I going to die?" I asked. The question felt childish, small. "Not if we act fast." "Doctor," Evans said, his eyes hard, "but this is an invasive craniotomy. Given your state of confusion upon arrival and the high risks involved, hospital policy requires a next of kin to sign off on the anesthesia and the surgical consent. We need consent, now." A nurse, a kind woman named Sarah with sad eyes, held up a clipboard. She looked at me with pity. "We have Scott and Diane Parker listed as your emergency contacts. Are these the correct numbers?" "Yes," I rasped. "Call them." Tessa stood in the corner, pacing like a caged animal. She still had her graduation gown on, looking out of place in the clinical white room. "Put it on speaker," she told the nurse. "Let them hear it." The nurse dialed. The room went silent. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound. Ring, ring, ring. "Hi, you have reached Scott. Leave a message." Voicemail. The nurse frowned and dialed the second number. My mother's cell phone. Ring, ring, ring. "This is Diane. We are currently out of the country enjoying some much-needed family time. Please leave a message after the beep." Family time. The words hung in the sterile air like a toxic gas. They were out of the country. St. Lucia. They had actually gone. They had chosen the beach over my graduation. And now, they were unreachable, while I lay here with a time bomb in my head. "Try again," Tessa snapped, her voice cracking. "Call them again. Tell them their daughter is dying." The nurse tried. Again and again. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The doctor was checking his watch, looking at the monitors where my heart rate was beginning to climb erratically. The pressure in my head was building. I could feel it behind my eyes, a pulsing warning. "We can't wait much longer." "Doctor," Evans said, turning to the nurse, "if we can't get a hold of them, I will have to get the chief of surgery to sign off on a 2-physician consent. But legal hates that. We need family." "I'm family," the voice boomed from the hallway. Startling everyone, we all turned toward the double doors. My grandfather, Frank Parker, burst through the entrance. He was 78 years old, a man who usually moved with the slow, deliberate pace of someone whose joints had been ground down by 40 years of construction work. But today, he looked like he had run a marathon. His suit, an old charcoal one he saved for funerals and weddings, was rumpled. His chest was heaving, sweat beaded on his forehead, dripping down into his white eyebrows. But it was his eyes that scared me. They were red-rimmed, bloodshot, and wide with terror. In his right hand, he clutched a thick, yellow manila envelope. He gripped it so tightly his knuckles were white, holding it against his chest as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "Grandpa," I breathed out, tears finally leaking from my eyes. He rushed to the bedside, ignoring the nurse who tried to intercept him. He grabbed my hand, his palms rough and calloused, warm and trembling. "I'm here, Livy. I'm here. I saw it. I was in the front row. I saw you fall." He had been there. He was the only one who had come. The realization hit me harder than the pavement had. "Sir, are you the legal guardian, Doctor?" Evans asked, stepping forward. "I am her grandfather," Frank barked, not looking away from me. "Her parents are unavailable." He spat the word out like it was poison on his tongue. "We need consent for emergency decompression surgery," the doctor explained quickly, wasting no time on pleasantries. "She has a mass compressing her brain." "Do it," Frank said instantly. "Do whatever you have to do to save my girl. I will sign whatever damn paper you have." "I need to inform her parents," the nurse said gently, holding the phone. "We have left messages. We need to keep trying." Frank turned to look at Tessa, then back at the nurse. His expression hardened. The fear in his eyes was replaced by a cold, burning anger I had never seen in him before. It was a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Don't bother calling them again," Frank said. His voice was low, shaking with rage. He looked through the glass of the ER room, staring at nothing. Or maybe staring at a future I couldn't see yet. "Why?" Tessa whispered, stepping closer. "Frank, they need to know." Frank held up the yellow envelope, pressing it against the railing of my bed. "Because they won't pick up for you. They won't pick up for her life." He looked down at me, tears finally spilling over his weathered cheeks. "They will only come back for the money." I did not understand what he meant. The pain in my head was becoming a roar, a deafening noise that made thinking impossible. The nurses began to unlock the wheels of my bed. "Doctor." Evans was shouting orders to prep the operating theater. The lights overhead flashed by 1, 2, 3 as they began to move me. "Wait," I said, panic rising in my chest. I fumbled for my phone on the side table. I need to check." I do not know why I did it. Maybe it was a reflex. Maybe I was a glutton for punishment. Maybe I just wanted one piece of evidence that I mattered to the people who gave me life. I unlocked the screen with trembling fingers. My notifications were full, but not with well wishes, not with congratulations. 87 missed calls, all from Dad. 87 calls in the last 20 minutes. Since the moment the hospital likely left that first frantic voicemail mentioning surgery and consent, but there was no voicemail asking if I was okay. There was no text saying, "We are flying back immediately." There was no, "I love you." There was just one text message, sent 2 minutes ago. "Don't sign anything. Call me now." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the linoleum floor as the anesthesia mask covered my face. Darkness took me, but the chill of that message stayed in my bones, colder than the operating room air. 4 weeks before the lights went out in my head. I was busy trying to keep the lights on in my apartment. It was 11 o'clock at night on a Tuesday. The Cypress and Clay Cafe smelled like stale roasted beans and bleach. I was wiping down the counter for the 3rd time, my apron heavy with coffee grounds and the sheer exhaustion that settles into your bones when you are 23 years old and burning the candle at both ends. Plus the middle, my manager, a guy named Dave, who thought minimum wage was a generous gift from the gods, was in the back counting the till. "You missed a spot near the grinder, Olivia," he shouted without looking up. I did not miss a spot. I never missed a spot. That was my defining character trait. I was Olivia the reliable, Olivia the efficient, Olivia, who could juggle a full course load, a part-time job, and the emotional maintenance of a family of 4 without dropping a single ball. I wiped the spot anyway. I drove home to Briar Glen in my Honda Civic, a car that rattled ominously whenever I went over 40 miles per hour. Briar Glen was one of those Missouri towns that prided itself on manicured lawns and devastatingly polite gossip. It was the kind of place where a "for sale" sign on a lawn sparked 3 separate neighborhood meetings. My parents' house was a colonial revival on the nice side of town. The side where the driveways were paved with brick and the mailboxes looked like miniature mansions. I let myself in. The house was quiet, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the quiet of a war room before the strategy meeting. The dining room table, usually reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas, was currently a battlefield. It was covered in glossy magazines, fabric swatches, and enough cardstock to deforest a small country. My sister, Brianna, was getting married. Brianna was 26, beautiful in the way that required high maintenance, and currently the sun around which the Parker solar system revolved. She was sitting at the table with my mother, Diane. They were holding up two nearly identical shades of cream-colored linen. "It is ivory mist, Mom," Brianna said, her voice tight with the stress of someone whose biggest problem was a napkin color. "Not champagne whisper. Champagne whisper clashes with the bridesmaids' sashes." "You are right, honey. You are always right," my mother soothed. She looked up and saw me standing in the doorway, still wearing my coffee-stained uniform. Her eyes didn't soften. They just shifted gears from wedding planner to manager. "Oh, good. You are here," Mom said. She did not ask how work was. She did not ask about my finals. "We need you to run to the printer tomorrow. The sample menus came back with the wrong font size. It needs to be Garamond, size 12, not Times New Roman." I put my keys in the bowl. "Mom, I have a biochemistry exam tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Then I have a shift at the cafe." "It will only take 20 minutes, Brianna interjected, not looking up from a magazine featuring a bride standing on a cliff in Santorini. "You can do it on your lunch break. You are so good at organizing things. Liv, please, I am drowning here." I looked at Brianna. She wasn't drowning. She was floating on a raft of parental financial support and adoration, but I nodded. I always nodded. "Fine," I said. "I will go." "Great," Mom said, already turning back to the linen. "Oh, and check the tracking number for the favors. They are stuck in customs or something." I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. My head was throbbing, a dull ache behind my eyes that I assumed was just dehydration and caffeine withdrawal. I leaned against the granite counter. Watching them through the archway, they looked like a unit, a team. "Mom," I called out. She was holding a piece of ribbon up to the light. "Since I have the afternoon off on Friday," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "I was wondering if maybe we could go to the mall. I need to find a dress for graduation. It is in 4 weeks. My mother froze for a fraction of a second, then sighed. It was a sigh that suggested I had just asked her to solve a complex physics equation. "Friday," she said. "Oh, Olivia, Friday is the final fitting for Brianna's reception gown. We are driving into the city. I can come with you," I suggested. "We can stop at a department store after." "It is going to be a long day, sweetie," she said, finally looking at me. Her smile was tight. "And honestly, why spend department store prices? You are the best online shopper in the family. You always find those amazing coupon codes. Just order something. You know your size." "I just thought," I trailed off. "I thought it would be nice to go together." "We will celebrate after the wedding," she said firmly. "Once the stress is over, you know how important this trip to St. Lucia is. It is a destination wedding. Olivia, it is complicated." "Right," I said. St. Lucia, the destination wedding, the family vacation, the event of the decade. I went upstairs to my room, passing my father's home office. The door was ajar. Scott Parker was sitting at his heavy oak desk, bathed in the blue light of his computer monitor. My father was a man who dealt in consulting, a vague term that meant he wore suits, talked loudly on the phone, and constantly complained about overhead costs. "Dad," I knocked on the frame. He jumped slightly, then swiveled his chair around. "Olivia, you are home late." "It is my normal time," I said. Right. He rubbed his temples. He looked tired, but not the physical kind of tired I felt. It was a nervous energy. He shuffled some papers on his desk, turning them face down. "Actually, Come in here for a second. I need a favor. I stepped inside. The room smelled of cedar and old paper. I am having trouble with the scanner again, he said. He gestured to a stack of documents on the corner of the desk. They looked dense, legal size. I need these digitized and sent to our accountant by tomorrow morning. My eyes are shot. Can you do it? You are faster with the tech stuff. I looked at the stack. Dad, I have to study. It will take 10 minutes, he said, his voice taking on that edge that meant do not argue with me. Just scan them as a single PDF. Do not mess with the order. I sighed and walked over to the machine. I picked up the top page. It was a thick, creamy paper, not standard printer stock. I glanced at the header, Trust Indenture Amendment. My eyes skimmed down the page. I saw words like beneficiary, revocation, and successor. What is this? I asked. Are you changing your will? He snatched the paper from my hand, a little too quickly. It is just standard portfolio maintenance. Olivia, boring tax stuff to lower our liability for the wedding expenses. You know how much this St. Lucia trip is costing me. I am just moving some assets around to make sure the cash flow is liquid. Okay, I said, feeling a prickle of unease. But why does it say, just scan it, Olivia, he snapped. Then he softened, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Please, help your old man out. I'm doing all this for you girls, you know, to make sure you have a future. I fed the papers into the scanner, one by one. The machine whirred rhythmically. I watched the words disappear into digital format, transfer of authority, primary asset holder. It meant nothing to me. Really, I was a biology major, not a finance student, but the way he watched me, hovering over my shoulder, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Thanks, he said when I was done. You can go to bed. Email that to me. I went to my room. But I didn't go to bed. I sat on the floor with my textbooks, staring at a diagram of the Krebs cycle until the words started to swim. The next day, I met Tessa for lunch between classes. We sat on a concrete bench near the campus fountain. Tessa was eating a sandwich with the ferocity of someone who had skipped breakfast. So let me get this straight, Tessa said, swallowing a bite of turkey and Swiss. You worked until midnight, went home, scanned your dad's shady bank papers, and today you are running errands for the princess bride. It is not shady, I defended weakly. It is tax stuff, and Brianna is just stressed. Tessa rolled her eyes so hard I thought they would get stuck. Liv, look at me. You are the valedictorian. You are graduating with a 4.0 GPA. You have worked 2 jobs, and they treat you like the family intern. They are just busy, I said. The wedding is huge, 300 guests in the Caribbean. And when are they booking your ticket? Tessa asked. I looked down at my hands. Mom said she is waiting for a dip in the airline prices. She said it is cheaper if they book the bridal party first. Bullshit, Tessa said. She did not use the polite word. That is absolute garbage. They are prioritizing the florist over their own daughter. You are like an emotional ATM to them. Olivia, they walk up, punch in a code, take what they need, your time, your energy, your tech support, and walk away without even checking the balance. It will be different after graduation, I said. Once I have my degree, I will get a real job. I will move out. I hope so, Tessa said, because watching this makes me want to scream. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a text from Brianna about font sizes or my mom about tracking numbers. The screen said, Grandpa Frank. A genuine smile broke across my face for the first time in 24 hours. I answered immediately. Hi, Grandpa? There she is. His voice crackled over the line. He sounded a little breathless, the way he always did lately, like he had just climbed a flight of stairs. How is my genius doing? Did you eat lunch and do not lie to me, Livy? A coffee is not lunch. I am eating a bagel. I lied. I was actually eating an apple I found in the bottom of my backpack. How are you? How is the hip? The hip is fine. The doctors are crooks, but the hip is fine. he grumbled. Listen, I wanted to check in about the big day. It is the 22nd. Right 10 in the morning. Yes, I said, feeling a lump in my throat. You remember. Of course I remember, he said indignantly. It is the only date on my calendar. I already booked the hotel, the Motel 6 on the highway. It is not the Ritz, but it has clean sheets. Grandpa, you do not have to come all this way, I said, though I desperately wanted him to. It is a 4-hour drive. I am coming, he said firmly. Wild horses could not stop me. Besides, I have something for you. Grandma's gift. The quilt, I asked. My grandmother had been a quilter. I assumed she had left me one of her unfinished projects. No, Frank said. His voice dropped an octave, becoming serious. Not a quilt? Better than a quilt. She made me promise to give it to you only when you finish school. She wanted to make sure you were ready. Ready for what? Ready to be free, he said cryptically. We will talk about it when I see you. Just keep your head down. Livy, do not let them grind you into dust before you cross that finish line. I won't, I promised. Good. Now go eat a real sandwich. I love you. Kid. Love you too. Grandpa? I hung up. The warmth of his voice lingered for a moment, then faded as the reality of my to-do list crashed back in. 2 nights later, I was back at the house, dropping off the printed menus. The house was empty, or so I thought. My parents' car was in the driveway, but the lights were dim. I walked into the kitchen to leave the box on the counter. I heard my mother's voice coming from the sunroom. She was on the phone. I froze. I should have announced myself. I should have walked in and said, "Here are the menus. Font size 12, Garamond." But I didn't. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, holding the heavy box. No, Karen, she is not coming on the early flight with us, my mother was saying. She was laughing lightly, the sound of ice clinking in a glass. We are going a week early to prep the venue. Olivia she has things to do here. There was a pause. The person on the other end must have asked why. Oh, you know Olivia, my mother said, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper she used when she was gossiping. She does not really fit in with the wedding crowd. She is so serious all the time. Besides, she is staying at the house to watch the dogs. Watch the dogs. That was my role, while they sipped cocktails in St. Lucia. I would be here, walking the golden retrievers. Does she mind? My mother repeated the question. Oh, God, no. She loves it. Olivia can handle it. She is so independent. She said the word independent with a strange inflection. It didn't sound like praise. It sounded like a dismissal. It sounded like a justification. She is independent, so we don't have to parent her. She is independent, so we don't have to worry about her feelings. She is independent, so we can leave her behind. I set the box of menus down on the counter. I did it silently. I didn't slam the door. I didn't storm in and scream that I was not independent, that I was just lonely and tired and desperate for them to look at me the way they looked at Brianna. I just walked back out the front door, got into my rattling Honda Civic, and drove back to my apartment. My head started to hurt again. That same sharp thumping behind my left eye. I rubbed my temple, ignoring it. I had a shift at the cafe in an hour, and I needed to save money. After all, I was independent. I had to pay for my own graduation gown. The headaches did not arrive with a bang. They crept in like a fog, insidious and slow, until they became a permanent filter over my world. At first, I blamed the obvious culprits. I was a senior in college during finals week, surviving on a diet of instant ramen, triple-shot espressos, and panic. Of course my head hurt. Everyone's head hurt. It was the biological price of academic excellence. But this felt different. It was not the dull throb of sleep deprivation. It was a pressure, a physical weight sitting directly behind my eyes, as if my skull had suddenly become 2 sizes too small for my brain. There were moments, terrifying fleeting moments, where the world would lose its sharp edges. I would be looking at a textbook, and for a split second, the text would smear, as if someone had placed a sheet of wax paper over my eyes. Then I would blink, hard, and the clarity would snap back. I told myself it was eye strain. I told myself I needed new contact lenses. I told myself anything other than the truth, because I did not have time for the truth. The first time my body actually rebelled was at the cafe. It was the Friday lunch rush. The line snaked out the door, a wall of impatient customers demanding lattes and heated croissants. I was carrying a tray loaded with 4 ceramic mugs and a pitcher of water. The noise of the espresso grinder was usually background white noise to me, but today, it sounded like a jackhammer drilling directly into my ear canal. I turned toward table 4, and the floor seemed to drop 3 inches beneath my feet. My knees buckled. I stumbled, the tray tipping dangerously. Hot coffee sloshed over the rim, scalding my thumb, but the pain felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. I managed to catch myself against the counter, the ceramic clattering loudly but miraculously, not breaking. "Whoa, easy there. Parker." Dave, the manager, was at my elbow instantly. He did not look concerned about my health. He looked concerned about the potential lawsuit of a slip and fall in the dining area. He gripped my arm, steadying me. "You look pale," he said, frowning. "Like sheet of paper pale. You going to faint on me?" I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the static from my peripheral vision. The nausea roiled in my stomach. "I am fine," I lied. "Just tripped. New shoes." "You want to clock out?" Dave asked. "I can call Sarah in." I did the math instantly in my head. If I clocked out now, I would lose 6 hours of pay. That was roughly $80 plus tips. $80 was my share of the electric bill and a week of groceries. "No," I said, straightening my spine and forcing a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "I am good. Seriously. Just need a glass of water." I finished the shift. I served the coffees. I smiled at the customers. But every time I moved my head too quickly, the world lagged behind. A split-second delay that made me feel like I was walking underwater. When I met Tessa later that evening at the library, she took one look at me and closed her book. "We are going to urgent care," she announced. "I cannot," I said, pressing the heels of my hands into my eyes. "I have the fitting tomorrow. Brianna needs me to inspect the beadwork on her veil because she thinks the seamstress is trying to cheat her." "Screw the veil," Tessa snapped. She reached across the table and pulled my hands away from my face. "Look at your pupils. Olivia, they are different sizes, or at least they look weird. You have been complaining about this headache for 2 weeks. It is stress," I insisted, though a cold shiver of fear ran down my spine at the mention of my pupils. "Once graduation is over, once the wedding is over, I will sleep for a week. I promise. I will go to the doctor then." "You are stubborn," she said, her voice tight with worry. "And you are prioritizing people who would not prioritize you if you were on fire." "I am fine," I repeated. It was my mantra. If I said it enough, maybe it would become true. The next morning, the headache had receded to a dull, rhythmic thumping, manageable enough to drive to my parents' house. I walked in expecting chaos, but the house was strangely quiet. My mother and Brianna were gone, probably at the salon, but my father was home. Scott Parker was in the living room, which was unusual. Usually, on a Saturday morning, he was on the golf course. He was sitting on the sofa, a stack of papers spread out on the coffee table in front of him. He looked up when I entered, and for a second, I saw something flash across his face. Guilt, nervousness. It was gone too quickly to parse. "Olivia," he said, standing up. He was wearing his weekend casual polo shirt, the one he wore when he wanted to look relaxed but still rich. "Glad you stopped by. I was going to call you." "I am here for the veil," I said, dropping my bag. "Mom said it is in the guest room." Yeah, it is up there," he said dismissively. He gestured to the spot on the sofa next to him. "But sit down for a second. I need your help with something, since you are the smart one." He tried to make it a joke, a compliment, but his laugh was dry. I sat down. wary. My father never asked for help unless it involved technology he refused to learn or manual labor he refused to do. "What is it?" "Just some housekeeping," he said. He picked up a document, a thick packet of paper stapled at the top. The edges were curled, as if he had been holding it for a while. "With the trip coming up, and you girls getting older, I realized our family files are a mess, outdated. I'm just tidying up the estate planning, crossing the T's, dotting the I's." He pushed the packet toward me, along with a heavy black fountain pen. "I just need you to sign on the sticky notes," he said. "It is just acknowledging that you are still a member of the household for insurance purposes. Stuff like that. Standard procedure." I took the pen, but I did not sign. I looked at the paper. The text was dense, single-spaced, and full of legal jargon. My headache spiked, the words swimming for a moment before snapping into focus. Irrevocable trust amendment transfer of beneficiary rights, successor, trustee designation. I frowned. This did not look like insurance paperwork. I flipped to the second page. My eyes caught a paragraph halfway down. "Waives all rights to independent audit, assigns power of attorney regarding the Parker family asset holding loan reaffirmation and collateral agreement." "Dad," I said slowly, "this says loan reaffirmation. What loan? And why does it say I am waiving an audit?" He moved faster than I expected. He reached out and put his hand over the paper. Covering the text, his palm was clammy. "It is just legal speak, Olivia," he said, his voice rising a notch. "Banks require all this jargon. It just means that if something happens to me and your mother, you and Brianna can access the house without going through probate. I am trying to protect you." But this part, I tried to lift his hand. "It mentions a specific account number, ending in 409. That is not the main family account. It is a sub-account," he snapped. He pulled the papers away from me entirely, sliding them back into a folder. The relaxed weekend dad persona evaporated, replaced by the irritable man who hated being questioned. "Jesus, Olivia, why do you have to make everything a federal case? I ask for one signature, one simple signature to make sure you are taken care of, and you treat me like I am trying to scam you." "I am not," I said, feeling my heart rate climb. The thumping in my head synchronized with my pulse. "I just want to read it. Tessa said I should never sign anything without understanding it." "Tessa," he scoffed. "Does Tessa pay your tuition? Does Tessa put a roof over your head? I am your father." "I know," I said. "But—" "Forget it," he said. Standing up abruptly, he tucked the folder under his arm. "If you do not trust me, fine. Forget I asked. I will figure out another way to handle the assets. But do not come crying to me when the state takes a 40% tax bite out of your inheritance because you were too busy playing lawyer to sign a form." He stormed out of the room toward his office. I sat there, stunned. The air in the room felt thin. My inheritance. We never talked about money in this family, except to complain about how much things cost. When my mother and Brianna returned an hour later, chatting loudly about crystal embellishments, I tried to bring it up. I found my mother in the kitchen, unpacking a salad. "Mom," I said, "Dad tried to get me to sign some papers earlier, for the estate." My mother froze, a forkful of kale halfway to her mouth. She didn't look at me. She looked at the fridge. "Oh, did he?" "He said it was for insurance," I said, "but it looked like a trust document, and something about a loan." "Do we have a loan?" She turned around, her expression tight. It was the same look she gave when a waiter got her order wrong, annoyed, but trying to maintain dignity. "Your father handles the finances, Olivia," she said. "He is under a lot of pressure with this wedding. It is costing a fortune. You know, if he asked you to sign something, it was to help the family. You are always so suspicious. It is really unbecoming." "I am not suspicious," I argued, my voice trembling slightly. I felt like he was hiding something." "He is not hiding anything," she snapped. "He is trying to make sure you girls have a safety net. You should be grateful he thinks about your future, considering you are so determined to distance yourself from us." She turned back to her salad. Conversation over. I left the house feeling worse than when I arrived. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. My head was not just hurting now, it felt fragile, like an eggshell about to crack. That night, my phone rang. It was Grandpa Frank. "Hello?" I answered. I was lying in the dark with a cold compress over my eyes. "Livy," his voice was rough, urgent. There was no preamble, no pleasantries about the weather. "Where are you?" "I am at home," I said, sitting up. "Why, what is wrong?" "I just got off the phone with your father," Frank said. He was asking questions, asking if I had spoken to you, asking if I had told you anything about the family accounts. A cold knot formed in my stomach. He tried to make me sign something today. "Grandpa," he said it was for the estate. "Did you sign it?" Frank's voice was almost a shout. "Olivia, tell me you did not sign it." "I didn't," I said quickly. "I wanted to read it first, and he got mad and took it away." I heard a heavy exhale on the other end of the line, a sound of profound relief. "Good. Good girl. Listen to me. Do not sign anything, not a birthday card, not a permission slip, nothing. If he puts a piece of paper in front of you, you tear it up." "What is going on?" I asked. "Grandpa, you are scaring me. What is in those papers?" "He is desperate," Frank said, his voice lowering. "He has been living above his means for 20 years, and the bill is finally coming due. He thinks he can move things around to cover the holes before anyone notices." "Use what?" "I am coming up early," Frank said, dodging the question. "I am leaving Tuesday. I will get a room at that motel near the campus. I want to be there. I have a bad feeling. Livy, my knees are aching, and that always means a storm is coming." "You do not have to come early," I said, but I was weak. "Actually, maybe that would be nice." "I will see you Tuesday," he said. "And Olivia, if your head is still hurting, you go to a doctor. Do not worry about the money. I have a little stash. I will pay for it." "I am fine," I said automatically. "You are not fine," he said gently. "But you will be." We hung up. I sat in the darkness, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. My laptop was open on my desk, the screen glowing blue in the dim room. A notification from the university registrar was blinking in the corner. "Action required. Finalize graduation profile. Please update emergency contact information." I stared at the cursor. I should change it. I should put Tessa. I should put Grandpa Frank. After today, after the way my father looked at me, after the way my mother dismissed me, I should erase them from the line that asked, "Who do we call if you are dying?" My finger hovered over the trackpad. I highlighted Scott Parker. I hesitated. Despite everything, despite the emotional ATM comment, despite the coldness, despite the suspicion there was a pathetic, childish part of me that still wanted them to be the ones. I wanted to believe that if something truly terrible happened, if I was really in danger, the petty grievances and the financial secrets would fall away. I wanted to believe that they would be parents. I left the names. Primary contact, Scott Parker, father. Secondary contact, Diane Parker, mother. I clicked save. I closed the laptop, the sudden darkness swallowing the room. A sharp, electric jolt of pain shot through my head, so intense it made my teeth ache. I lay back down, pulling the pillow over my face, praying that the blind faith I had just placed in the system would not be the thing that killed me. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration. At least, that was how my mother had framed it when she insisted I come over and bring Tessa. She had called it a family unity meal, a phrase that sounded less like a warm invitation and more like a mandatory corporate retreat. We sat around the mahogany dining table, the one that was usually covered in Brianna's wedding debris. Tonight, it was set with the good china, roast chicken, glazed carrots, and a bottle of expensive red wine that my father had decanted with great ceremony. The air in the room was brittle. It felt like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm, where the pressure drops so low your ears pop. Tessa sat next to me, her posture rigid, She had been suspicious from the moment we walked in. She kicked me gently under the table, a silent signal that said, "Be careful." "This looks delicious. Mrs. Parker," Tessa said, her voice polite but strained. "Thank you, Tessa," my mother said, beaming. She was vibrating with energy, her eyes darting between my father and Brianna. "We have some exciting news. We wanted to share it with everyone before the chaos of the final wedding prep really hits." I put down my fork. A knot formed in my stomach, tight and cold. "What news?" My father cleared his throat. He took a sip of wine, swirling the crimson liquid in the glass. "Well, you know how stressful this wedding planning has been for your mother and sister. The logistics, the vendors, the sheer scale of the event in St. Lucia. It has been exhausting." "We are burnt out," Brianna sighed. Leaning back in her chair, she looked perfectly rested to me, her skin glowing from a facial she had gotten yesterday. "I feel like I'm on the verge of a breakdown. My anxiety is through the roof." "So," my mother continued, reaching out to squeeze Brianna's hand, "we decided we need a reset, a little pre-wedding detox. We booked a family getaway to the resort in St. Lucia a week early, just to acclimate, to relax, to get into the island mindset before the guests arrive." I blinked. "That sounds nice," I said, genuinely trying to be happy for them. "When do you leave?" My mother took a bite of a carrot, chewing slowly. "We fly out on the morning of the 21st. The fork in my hand clattered against the plate. The sound was sharp, violent in the quiet room. I did the mental math. It was not hard math. It was a date I had written on every calendar, every sticky note, and every planner I owned for the last 4 years. "The 21st, I repeated, my voice hollow. "Of this month." "Yes," my mother said, still smiling. "Next Tuesday." "Mom," I said, the blood draining from my face. "My graduation is on the 22nd, next Wednesday." Silence descended on the table. It was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of people who had been caught but did not care enough to be embarrassed. My mother's eyes widened in a performance of theatrical surprise that would not have fooled a toddler. "Oh, is it really? I thought it was the following weekend. Are you sure?" "Yes, I am sure," I said, my voice trembling. "I sent you the invitation 3 months ago. I put it on the fridge. I reminded you last week when I asked about the dress." "Well," my mother said, waving her hand dismissively, "these dates get so confusing. The wedding is the 28th, and we just assumed, well, it does not matter. The tickets are non-refundable. We got a fantastic deal on first-class seats." I looked at my father. He was cutting his chicken with surgical precision, avoiding my gaze. "Dad?" He did not look up. "It is a conflict. Olivia, unfortunate. But Brianna really needs this. She is the bride. This is her moment. And I am the valedictorian," I said. I felt a surge of heat in my chest, a rare spark of anger pushing through the usual resignation. "I am giving the speech. I am speaking to 3,000 people. It is the biggest day of my life so far." Brianna laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Oh, Liv, come on. It is just a ceremony. You sit in the sun for 4 hours, wear a hideous robe, and shake hands with some old dean. It is not like it is a wedding. We can watch the video later. They live stream it, right?" "That is not the point," I said. My hands were shaking under the table. "I wanted you there. I wanted my family there." My father finally set his knife down. He looked at me, and his expression was not apologetic. It was disappointed. "Olivia," he said, his voice taking on that lecture tone I hated. "Stop making this about you. We are talking about a major life event for your sister. A destination wedding involves a lot of moving parts. We need to be there early to handle the vendors." "You can handle vendors and still fly out on the 23rd, I argued. "It is a 4-hour flight. We need to decompress," Brianna whined. "God, why do you always have to be so difficult? Why can't you just be happy for me?" Because you are skipping my graduation to get a tan, I snapped. Hey. My father slammed his hand on the table. The wine glasses jumped. Watch your tone. We are doing this for the family. And frankly, Olivia, we didn't think you would mind this much. Why wouldn't I mind? I asked, tears stinging my eyes. Because you are strong, my father said. He said it like it was a fact, like stating the sky was blue. You have always been the independent one, the capable one. You do not need us holding your hand. Brianna is more sensitive. She needs our support right now. You are fine. You are always fine. I stared at him. The words hit me like a physical blow. You are strong, so you do not get love. You are capable, so you do not get support. I am not fine, I whispered. I have a headache that hasn't gone away in 3 weeks. I am working 2 jobs, and I just want my parents to see me graduate. Oh, stop it, my mother snapped. She blotted her lips with a napkin. Now you are just demanding attention because Brianna is in the spotlight. It is really unattractive. Olivia, do not ruin dinner with this jealousy. Tessa stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Jealousy? Tessa asked, her voice shaking with rage. Are you kidding me? She is graduating top of her class. She is the smartest person in this room, and you are treating her like she is an inconvenience. You are abandoning her. Tessa, I said, grabbing her wrist. I could see my father's face turning purple. I did not want to fight. I just wanted to disappear. Don't, please, sit down. No, I won't sit down, Tessa said, glaring at my parents. You people are unbelievable. Get out, my father said calmly. He pointed to the door. This is a family dinner. You are a guest. If you cannot be respectful, you can leave. I am leaving, Tessa said. She grabbed her purse. Come on, Liv, we are going. I looked at Tessa, then at my parents. My mother was aggressively cutting a piece of carrot. My father was staring at me with a dare in his eyes. Choose her, and see what happens. I will stay, I said softly to Tessa. I have to get the menus for Brianna later anyway. Tessa looked at me with heartbreak in her eyes. Liv. Go, I mouthed. Tessa left. The front door slammed. The rest of the dinner passed in silence. My head throbbed so hard I could barely see the plate in front of me. The tunnel vision was creeping back in at the edges, dark vignettes closing in on the candlelight. When I finally escaped to my car an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Brianna. Since you are not coming to the island early, can you handle a few things here? 1. Call the limo service and confirm the pickup for the guests on the 28th. 2. Pick up the personalized cookies from the bakery on Main Street. 3. My registry gifts are arriving at the house. Bring them inside so they do not get stolen. Thanks. You are the best. I stared at the screen. No apology. No, I am sorry we are missing your big day. Just a to-do list. I was not a sister. I was an unpaid employee. I drove back to my apartment in a daze. The streetlights smeared into long, glowing streaks against the windshield. I felt nauseous. A deep, rolling sickness that had nothing to do with the roast chicken. I called Tessa when I got inside. I hate them, Tessa said the moment she picked up. I actually hate them. Liv, you have to call your grandfather. Tell him what happened. I can't, I said, sinking onto my bed. The room was spinning slightly. If I tell Grandpa, he will call Dad and scream at him. It will cause a huge scene. Dad will blame me for tattling. I just want peace. Tessa, I just want to get through this week. They are leaving you, Tessa said, her voice breaking. They are choosing a vacation over you. I know, I said. I know. We hung up. I went into the bathroom to wash my face. I looked in the mirror. The face staring back at me did not look like Olivia Parker. It looked like a ghost. My skin was translucent, pale as milk. There were dark, purple bruises under my eyes. But it was the eyes themselves that scared me. The pupils looked wrong, one slightly larger than the other. Just stress, I whispered to the reflection. Just stress and dehydration. I went back to my laptop. The screen was still open to the university portal. The emergency contact page. Primary contact Scott Parker. Secondary contact Diane Parker. I looked at those names. The people who were flying first class to the Caribbean while I walked across a stage alone. The people who thought my independence was a license to neglect me. My finger trembled on the trackpad. I clicked Add New Contact. Name Frank Parker. Relationship grandfather. Phone 555-0199. I moved him to the third slot. I could not bring myself to delete my parents. Not yet. The psychological tether was too strong. A steel cable forged over 23 years of trying to please them. But adding Frank felt like opening a window in a suffocating room. It was a small act of rebellion. A safety hatch. I closed the laptop and crawled into bed. The pain in my head was a rhythmic hammer now. Bang, bang, bang. I slept fitfully, dreaming of empty chairs and white noise. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a notification. The sun was streaming through the blinds, bright and merciless. I reached for my phone. Squinting against the light, it was a text from my mother. It was a photo. It showed 2 boarding passes lying on top of her passport, framed artistically against a glass of mimosa in the airport lounge. The destination code was visible: STL to UVF, St. Lucia. They had left early. They had not even waited for the 21st. They had caught an earlier flight. Underneath the photo was a short caption: "Finally, peace." I stared at the words. Finally, peace. Peace meant the airport lounge. Peace meant the beach. Peace meant getting away from the stress of the wedding. But as I lay there, my head pounding, my heart shattering in my chest, I realized what else it meant. Peace meant being away from me. I dropped the phone on the sheets. My hand was shaking so hard I could not stop it. They were gone. They were actually gone. And 3 days from now, when I stood at that podium, I would be speaking to a void where my family was supposed to be. The morning of my graduation did not start with the smell of pancakes or the sound of joyful chaos. It started with the buzzing of my phone against the nightstand, vibrating with a persistence that drilled directly into the headache I had nursed all night. I rolled over, the movement sending a fresh wave of nausea rolling through my stomach. The room was too bright. Even the thin slivers of sunlight cutting through the blinds felt aggressive, like needles pricking at my retinas. I reached for the phone, squinting one eye shut to focus on the screen. It was a text message from my mother. It was not a call. It was not a voice note full of tears and pride. It was a selfie. The image filled my screen. My mother, Diane, and my father, Scott, were squeezed into the frame, their faces distorted by the wide-angle lens of the front-facing camera. Behind them was a blur of turquoise water and white sand. They were wearing sunglasses. My mother was holding a cocktail with a pink umbrella in it. My father was giving a thumbs up. Below the image was a caption, "Proud of you. Have a great day." I stared at the picture. It looked like a postcard you buy at a gas station generic. Colorful, and completely devoid of intimacy. There was no soul in it. They looked like 2 strangers congratulating a distant relative. The "proud of you" felt like a stamp, something they had to type to absolve themselves of the guilt of being 2,000 miles away while their daughter walked across a stage. I did not reply. I could not. My fingers felt numb, and the anger that should have been there was buried under a thick, suffocating blanket of exhaustion. A knock at my door made me jump. "Liv, it is me. I have the keys." The door swung open, and Tessa walked in. She was already dressed in a sharp navy sundress, her hair curled, looking like the picture of a supportive best friend, but her smile faltered the moment she saw me sitting on the edge of the bed. "Oh my God," Tessa said, dropping her purse on the chair. She rushed over, placing a cool hand on my forehead. "You look like a ghost. No, worse. You look like a zombie that has been dead for a week. You are gray." "Olivia." "I am fine," I whispered. My voice sounded scrapier than usual. "Just the headache. It is bad today." "Did you sleep?" "A little," I lied. I had not slept. I had spent the night staring at the ceiling. wondering if I should tear up my speech. "You need to eat," Tessa said firmly. She pulled a granola bar out of her bag. "I knew you wouldn't make breakfast. Eat this. You cannot pass out on stage from low blood sugar." I took the bar. The wrapper crinkled loudly, a sharp noise that made me wince. I took a small bite. The taste of oats and chocolate turned to ash in my mouth. My stomach clenched violently. I scrambled off the bed and ran to the bathroom, barely making it to the toilet before my body rejected the food. I heaved, my ribs aching, but there was nothing to bring up, just bile and acid. The pressure in my head spiked with every retch, a red-hot thumping that felt like my brain was trying to push its way out of my skull. "Okay, that is it," Tessa said from the doorway, her voice trembling. "We are not going to graduation. We are going to the ER, right now." I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and stood up, gripping the sink for support. The face in the mirror terrified me. My eyes were sunken, the pupils mismatched again, the left one blown wide. A black pool swallowing the iris. "No," I said. I splashed cold water on my face, gasping at the shock. "I worked 4 years for this. Tessa, I wrote that speech. I am not missing it. I am not letting them take this away from me, too. Liv, look at your eyes." "I will wear sunglasses until the ceremony starts," I said, grabbing a towel. "Please, Tessa, just get me there. If I feel bad after the speech, we will go to the hospital. I promise." Tessa looked at me for a long moment. Her jaw set. She looked like she wanted to drag me to the car by force, but she saw the desperation in my face. She knew that if I didn't do this, if I didn't finish this one last thing, I would break completely. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "But the second you step off that stage, I am driving you to St. Jude's. No arguments." The drive to the university was a blur of motion sickness and anxiety. When we arrived, the campus was transformed. It was a carnival of joy. Thousands of people were swarming the lawns. There were balloons everywhere in the school colors, blue and gold. There were fathers in suits holding bouquets of roses wrapped in cellophane. There were mothers adjusting mortarboards and crying into tissues. There were younger siblings running around in their Sunday best. Everywhere I looked, I saw families. I saw a girl from my chemistry class being hugged by 2 parents at once, a sandwich of affection. I saw a guy from the football team laughing as his dad slapped him on the back. It was a visual assault of everything I did not have. I walked through the crowd like a specter, the noise, the laughter, the shouting. The camera shutters washed over me, but I felt separated from it, as if I were walking inside a glass bubble. I kept my head down, clutching my gown to my chest, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. "Keep breathing," Tessa whispered, linking her arm through mine. She was practically holding me up. We are almost at the staging area. We reached the check-in tent. I was handed my name card and directed to the front of the line, where the honor students were gathering. "I have to go find my seat," Tessa said, squeezing my arm. "I will be right there, front row. I will be cheering so loud you will be embarrassed." "Thank you," I said. "For everything." She left, and I was alone in a sea of strangers. I pulled my phone out of the pocket of my dress under the gown. I checked it one last time. Maybe there was a text now. Maybe the reality of the day had hit them. Maybe my father had felt a pang of conscience. There were no new messages. Wait, there was one. From my mother again. "Make sure you get a video of the speech. The Wi-Fi here is spotty, so we can't stream it. And send pics of you in the gown. Love you, send pics. Produce content. Document the moment so they could post it on Facebook later and claim credit for my success. My daughter, the valedictorian. They wanted the trophy without attending the game." I shoved the phone back into my pocket. I felt a cold, hard stone of resentment settle in my chest. It was heavier than the sadness now. It was solidifying. The procession began. The band started playing Pomp and Circumstance. The heavy brass notes vibrated in my chest. I walked automatically, following the heels of the girl in front of me. The sun was high overhead now. a blistering white heat that seemed to focus entirely on the crown of my head. The black polyester gown trapped the heat against my skin. Sweat trickled down my spine, cold and clammy. We marched into the stadium. The roar of the crowd was a physical force. It hit me like a wall of wind. 3,000 people clapping, whistling, shouting names. I scanned the front row, the VIP section. I saw him immediately. Grandpa Frank. He was sitting in the third seat from the aisle. He was wearing his gray suit, the one that smelled like mothballs and peppermint. He looked small in the large stadium seat, but his posture was rigid. He was not clapping. He was not smiling. He was staring at the stage with a ferocious intensity, like a guard dog on duty. In his lap, he held the thick yellow envelope with both hands. Next to him sat Tessa, looking anxious, and next to her as seat 4A, seat 4B, two white folding chairs, empty. They were not just empty. They were gaping wounds in the visual landscape of the front row, in a line of packed seats, of knees knocking together, of overflowing bags and happy relatives. Those two chairs were a void. They screamed of absence. They screamed of rejection. I looked away, swallowing the bile that rose in my throat again. I took my seat on the stage. The world was tilting slightly to the left. I gripped the armrests of my chair, closing my eyes for a second to reset my equilibrium. Just 20 minutes, I told myself. Just give the speech, get the diploma, and then you can collapse. The ceremony dragged on. The dean spoke, the president spoke. Their voices were muffled, like they were speaking through a thick wool blanket. The ringing in my ears, a high-pitched mosquito whine, was getting louder. It was competing with the speakers. And now, the MC's voice boomed, cutting through the haze. It is my honor to introduce our class valedictorian, graduating summa cum laude with a degree in biochemistry. Please welcome Olivia Parker. The applause surged again. I stood up. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. They were numb. Heavy logs that I had to manually command to move. I walked to the podium. The walk felt miles long. The wooden floorboards of the stage seemed to ripple like water. I reached the podium and gripped the sides. The wood was hot from the sun. I looked out at the sea of faces. It was a blur of colors. I blinked, trying to clear the tunnel vision that was encroaching on my peripheral sight. It was like looking through a pair of binoculars backwards. I took a deep breath. The air was thick and humid. "Good morning," I said. My voice sounded distant, echoing in my own skull. I looked down at my index cards. The words were swimming. The black ink was dancing on the white paper. I had memorized the speech. Thankfully, I didn't need to read it. "We made it," I said, forcing a smile. 4 years of coffee, late nights, and the pursuit of something greater than ourselves. I paused for effect. The crowd clapped politely. The pain in my head shifted. It stopped being a throb and became a piercing, continuous scream behind my left eye. It felt as if something was physically tearing inside my brain. "We did not get here alone," I continued, reciting the lines I had practiced in my mirror. "We are here because of the people who supported us, the people who answered our late-night calls, the people who believed in us when we did not believe in ourselves." I looked down at the front row. I needed to see Grandpa Frank. I needed an anchor. I found him. He was leaning forward, his face pale with worry. He knew. He could see it. Then my eyes slid to the right, to the 2 empty chairs. The image of those empty seats burned into my retinas. It was the last clear thing I saw. "We," I tried to say. "We thank our families." The word families stuck in my throat. And then, the light went out. It wasn't a fade to black. It was an explosion of white. A blinding, searing magnesium flare erupted in my vision, washing out the stadium, the crowd, and the sky. The tunnel closed instantly. The sound of the crowd was replaced by a roar like a jet engine taking off inside my head. My hands slipped from the podium. I tried to grab it again, to hold on, but my fingers had no strength. They were useless. I felt my knees give way. Not a stumble, but a complete structural failure. I fell. I felt the impact of my shoulder hitting the hard wooden deck of the stage, then the side of my face. The microphone stand must have fallen with me, because a horrific screech of feedback tore through the stadium speakers, a sound of electronic agony that made 3,000 people gasp in unison. I was lying on the stage. The sky above me was spinning wildly, a vortex of blue and white. Olivia. I heard Tessa's scream. It was raw, terrified, cutting through the roaring in my ears. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was trapped inside a body that had finally, catastrophically, shut down. Through the narrowing pinhole of my remaining vision, I saw movement in the front row. I saw Grandpa Frank stand up. He moved faster than a 78-year-old man should be able to move. He threw the yellow envelope onto the chair and vaulted over the low barricade separating the crowd from the stage. But what I noticed most, in that final second before the darkness swallowed me completely, were those two empty chairs next to him. They sat there, perfectly still, perfectly white, perfectly empty. My parents were sipping cocktails in St. Lucia, and I was dying on a stage in Missouri. Then, there was nothing. The transition was instantaneous. One moment there was sun and noise. The next there was the beep, beep, beep of machinery and the smell of antiseptic. I was not awake, not really. I was floating in a dark, cold space, but I could hear voices. They sounded urgent, sharp. BP is dropping, 100/60. Intracranial pressure is critical. Get the scans up, now. We need to decompress. Is the OR prepped? Who is the family? We need a signature. We cannot cut without a signature. I am the grandfather. Do it save her. Then, a voice that cut through the fog like a knife. It was calm, authoritative, and terrifying. Time is muscle. People, move her, now. There was a pause. The sound of wheels unlocking, the rush of air. And as I was being wheeled away, I heard the doctor speak to someone, maybe Tessa, maybe Frank, his voice low and grave. You got her here just in time. If we had waited 30 minutes longer, if she had collapsed in her dorm room instead of on that stage, she would not have made it, while I lay on a gurney, suspended in the dark, silent void of a chemically induced coma. The world above me descended into a chaotic blend of medical urgency and bureaucratic nightmares. I did not hear the sirens or the shouting, nor did I feel the cold antiseptic scrub on my scalp. What follows is the reconstruction of those critical hours, pieced together later from hospital phone logs, Tessa's tear-stained testimony, and the grim recounting of my grandfather. It is a record of who showed up when it mattered, and who simply let the phone ring. The clock on the wall of the trauma bay read 10:42 in the morning. My brain was swelling. The mass, which had been growing silently for months, had finally exerted enough pressure to trigger a crisis. Dr. Evans, the neurosurgeon on call, knew he had a window of less than 60 minutes before the damage became irreversible. But before he could cut into my skull, he had a legal mountain to climb. He needed a signature, in the United States. Performing a craniotomy on an adult patient without consent is a legal minefield. Unless the patient is John Doe or Jane Doe with zero identification. I had identification. I had a student ID in my pocket. I had a driver's license. And most damning of all, I had an electronic medical record that listed specific emergency contacts. Try the father again. Doctor, Evans barked, snapping on a pair of latex gloves. We are burning daylight. Nurse Sarah, the woman with the sad eyes who had first received me, stood at the nurse's station, the phone pressed to her ear. She was staring at the red digits on the timer. She dialed the number for Scott Parker. Ring, 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 ring. You have reached the voicemail of Scott Parker. I am currently unavailable. Please leave a brief message. Sarah hung up and dialed the number for Diane Parker. Ring, ring, ring. Hi, this is Diane. We are currently traveling. Leave a message. Damn it, Sarah hissed. Slamming the receiver down, she looked at the administrator standing next to her. A woman named Karen, holding a clipboard with liability waiver, written in bold letters at the top. They are not picking up. Both lines go straight to voicemail. It sounds like they are screening calls. Tessa was standing in the corner of the trauma bay, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold her own phone. She had been crying, but now the tears had dried into a mask of pure, white-hot panic. She heard the nurse. She realized what was happening. My life was being held hostage by a game of phone tag. Tessa unlocked her phone. She did not bother with politeness. She did not bother with the deference she usually showed my parents. She opened a group chat that included me, Brianna, Scott, and Diane. She typed with furious, trembling thumbs. Olivia collapsed. She is at St. Jude's. The doctor says it is her brain. They are prepping her for surgery right now. They say she might die. Call the hospital. Now. She hit send. The status changed to delivered. Then, read by Brianna. Then, nothing. No typing bubble. No incoming call. Just the digital silence of people who had decided that a crisis was an inconvenience they simply did not have the bandwidth for. They are reading it, Tessa screamed at the nurse. They are seeing the messages. Why aren't they calling? We cannot wait, doctor, Evans said. Stepping out of the bay, he looked at my grandfather, Frank Parker, who was standing like a statue by the door. Frank had not moved. He had not cried since we arrived at the hospital. He was in a mode I had only heard about from his stories of working construction in the 70s, a mode of absolute, unwavering focus. Mr. Parker. Doctor, Evans said. You are the grandfather. Technically, you are not the next of kin. The hierarchy goes spouse, then parents, then adult children, then siblings. You are down the list. If I let you sign this, and her parents sue me later for disfigurement or wrongful procedure, I lose my license. Frank looked at the doctor. His eyes were cold steel. If you do not operate, she dies. Is that correct? That is the likely outcome. Yes. Doctor, Evans replied. Then give me the phone, Frank said. He did not ask for the hospital phone. He pulled out his own ancient flip phone, a device that looked like it had survived a war. He flipped it open and dialed a number from memory. He did not call my mother. He called his son. He put the phone to his ear. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Everyone in the room held their breath. The heart monitor beeped rhythmically, a countdown timer to my potential end. Hello? My father's voice came through the speaker. It was loud, annoyed, and crystal clear. He was not frantic. He was not breathless. He sounded like a man who had been interrupted in the middle of ordering a drink. Scott, Frank said. His voice was not loud. It was terrifyingly quiet. It is your father. Dad, Scott sighed. We could hear the background noise, the chime of an airport announcement, the murmur of a crowd. Jesus. Dad, why are you calling right now? We are literally standing in the boarding line. We are about to scan our tickets. I told you we would be out of pocket. Olivia is in the hospital, Frank said. He did not sugarcoat it. Yeah, we got a text from her friend, Scott said dismissively. Something about fainting. Look, she probably just locked her knees in the heat. It happens every year at these things. She is dramatic. Dad, you know how she gets. She just wants us to feel bad for leaving. Tessa let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. She lunged forward, but the nurse held her back. Scott, Frank said, gripping the phone so tight the plastic creaked. Listen to me very carefully. This is not heat stroke. She has a mass on her brain. The surgeon is standing right in front of me. They need to cut her head open in the next 10 minutes or she is going to be dead before you order your first gin and tonic. There was silence on the other end. A long, static-filled pause. A mass? Scott asked. His voice lost some of its bravado, but it was quickly replaced by a new emotion hesitation. Well, what do you want me to do about it? I am in Missouri. Even if I turned around now, it would take me an hour to get there. The flight is boarding. Dad, they are calling our group. I need you to give verbal consent to the doctor, Frank said, or tell them I have the authority to sign. I can't deal with this right now, Scott stammered. Diane is already on the jetway. If I step out of line, we lose our slot. This trip cost $15,000. Dad, Non-refundable. You are worried about the money, Frank asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I am saying there is nothing I can do, Scott snapped, his voice rising in frustration. I am not a doctor. If she needs surgery, she needs surgery. Just you handle it. Frank, you are there. You sign whatever needs to be signed. I give you permission. Just don't make me miss this flight. Frank closed his eyes. He took a deep, shuddering breath. When he opened them again, the sadness was gone, replaced by a finality that severed the bond between father and son forever. Scott, Frank said, if you get on that plane, while your daughter is bleeding into her brain, do not bother coming back. Do not call me. Do not call her. You are done. Don't be dramatic, Frank, Scott said. We will call when we land. Just sign the damn paper. And then, the sound of a beep. My father had hung up. Frank stared at the phone for a second, then snapped it shut. He looked at Dr. Evans. He did not look like a man who had just been disowned by his son. He looked like a man who had just taken out the trash. Give me the pen, Frank said. Mr. Parker? The administrator started to protest. Verbal consent over the phone is a gray area without a recording. Give me the damn pen, Frank roared. The sound echoed off the tiled walls. Silencing the entire ER, the nurse handed him the clipboard. Frank signed his name with a flourish that tore through the paper. Frank Parker. She is my granddaughter, he said, handing it back. If anyone asks, I am her guardian. Now save her life. Doctor. Evans nodded. Let's go. They unlocked the wheels of my gurney. I was rushed through the double doors, down the hallway, and into the operating theater. The doors swung shut, cutting off the world of lawyers and cowards, leaving only the sterile sanctuary of the surgical team. The surgery took 6 hours. 6 hours of drilling, cutting, and delicate maneuvering around the optic nerve. Outside in the waiting room, the atmosphere was grim. Frank sat in a plastic chair, his hands clasped over the yellow envelope he still refused to let go of. He did not pace. He did not watch the television mounted on the wall. He just stared at the floor, praying to a God he hadn't spoken to in years. Tessa did not sit. She paced the length of the hallway until her heels blistered. She made calls to our other friends, to her own parents, creating a network of support that my own family had failed to provide. Eventually, exhausted by the adrenaline crash, she curled up on the floor next to Frank's chair, using his suit jacket as a pillow. Hour 1 passed. Frank bought a black coffee he did not drink. Hour 3 passed. A nurse came out to say I was stable, but the procedure was complex. Hour 5 passed. The sun began to set outside, casting long orange shadows across the hospital floor. Finally, at hour 6, the double doors opened. Dr. Evans walked out. He looked exhausted, his surgical cap pulled low, sweat staining the collar of his scrubs. Frank stood up. His knees cracked audibly. She made it, Doctor, Evans said, pulling down his mask. Tessa let out a sob of relief, covering her face with her hands. Frank just nodded, his shoulders slumping as the weight of the world lifted slightly. We got the pressure down, the doctor explained. It was a benign meningioma, large, but we removed most of it. She is in the ICU now. She is in a medically induced coma to let the brain heal. The next 48 hours are critical. We need to watch for swelling. Can we see her? Tessa asked. Briefly, Doctor, Evans said. But she won't know you are there. They walked into the ICU. The room was dark, lit only by the green and blue glow of the monitors. I was lying in the bed, my head wrapped in thick white bandages, a tube down my throat helping me breathe. I looked small, broken. Frank walked to the bedside. He reached out and touched my hand, avoiding the IV lines. I am here, Livy, he whispered. I am not going anywhere. Tessa stood on the other side, weeping silently. She pulled out her phone to text her mom that I was alive. Habit, or perhaps a morbid curiosity, made her open Instagram. At the very top of her feed was a new story, a fresh circle around Brianna Parker's profile picture. Tessa froze. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She shouldn't look. She knew she shouldn't look. But the anger in her chest was a living thing, demanding fuel. She tapped the circle. The photo filled the screen. It was taken from a balcony overlooking a stunning ocean vista. The water was sapphire blue, the sky a perfect azure. In the foreground, a manicured hand held a crystal flute of champagne against the sunset. There was no mention of a hospital, no mention of a prayer, no mention of the sister who was currently hooked up to a ventilator 3,000 miles away. The caption was short, written in a loopy, carefree font. St. Lucia sunset, no drama, just vibes. Tessa showed the screen to Frank. The old man looked at the image. He looked at the champagne. He looked at the caption. He did not get angry this time. The rage had burned itself out, leaving behind something colder and harder resolve. "Keep that," Frank said, his voice a low rumble. "Screenshot it, print it, save it." He looked back at my sleeping face, and then he patted the yellow envelope resting on the tray table. "They think this is over," Frank whispered. "They think they got away with it." He sat down in the chair next to my bed, prepared to keep vigil for as long as it took. They have no idea what is waiting for them when they land. Coming back to life was not the dramatic, gasp for air moment they show in the movies. It was a slow, agonizing crawl through a swamp of heavy sedation. The first thing I registered was the sound. It was a rhythmic, mechanical beeping that seemed to be synced with the throbbing inside my skull. Beep, thud, beep, thud. The second thing was the thirst. My throat felt like it had been scrubbed with sandpaper and then packed with cotton. I tried to swallow, but my tongue was a dry, swollen weight in my mouth. I tried to speak, to ask for water, but all that came out was a pathetic, dry croak. I opened my eyes. The light was dim, but it still felt like a physical assault. My vision was blurry at the edges, smeared with the residue of drugs and trauma. I blinked. Once, twice, trying to force the world into focus. The ceiling was white, tiled, familiar. I turned my head to the right. The movement sent a bolt of lightning down my neck and into the base of my skull. It felt as if my head had been stitched back together with a hot wire. I gasped, the pain sharp enough to cut through the morphine haze. "She is waking up!" The voice was soft, trembling. I focused on the corner of the room. 2 figures were there. Grandpa Frank was sitting in a vinyl hospital chair that looked far too small for him. He was asleep, his chin resting on his chest. He was still wearing the charcoal suit from graduation. It was wrinkled now, the collar unbuttoned, the tie loose. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. Next to him was Tessa. She was not asleep. She was staring at me, her eyes red and puffy, dark circles carved deep into her skin. She looked like she had been crying for 72 hours straight. "Liv," she whispered, rushing to the side of the bed. "Can you hear me?" I nodded, a microscopic movement. "Water," I rasped. She grabbed a plastic cup with a straw and held it to my lips. The water was lukewarm, but it tasted like nectar. I drank greedily until she pulled it away. "Slow down," she said gently. "You will get sick." "How long?" I asked. My voice sounded like gravel. 3 days, Tessa said. She smoothed the hair back from my forehead, her fingers avoiding the thick bandages wrapped around my skull. "You have been out for 3 days. Doctor, Evan said the swelling went down. You are going to be okay. Liv, you are going to be okay." Frank stirred in his chair. He snorted, opened his eyes, and saw me looking at him. He was on his feet in an instant, his stiff joints cracking. "Livy," he breathed. He moved to the other side of the bed and took my hand. His palm was rough, warm, and shaking. "You scared the hell out of me, kid." "I am sorry," I whispered. "Don't you be sorry," he said fiercely. "You didn't do anything wrong. You just rest." I lay there for a moment, letting the reality of the situation settle in. I was in a hospital. I had collapsed. I had brain surgery. Then, the memories hit me. The empty chairs, the text message, finally peace. Where are they? I asked. I did not have to specify who. Tessa and Frank exchanged a look. It was a look of heavy, uncomfortable silence. They are not here, Frank said bluntly. They are still in St. Lucia. I stared at him. Do they know? They know? Tessa said, her voice dripping with venom. I texted them. The hospital called them. Frank called them. And they are still in St. Lucia. Frank repeated. I closed my eyes. I expected to cry. I expected that familiar crushing weight of rejection to collapse my chest. But strange enough, no tears came. I felt dry, hollow. It was as if the surgery had not only removed the tumor, but had also severed the nerve endings that connected me to my love for them. I had no battery left to power the pain. Phone, I said. Liv, maybe you should wait, Tessa started. Give me my phone, Tessa. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out my smartphone. The screen was cracked across the corner, a casualty of my fall on the stage. I unlocked it. I went straight to Instagram. I did not have to search hard. My sister, Brianna, was a prolific poster. The first image on my feed was posted 5 hours ago. It was a group shot on a catamaran. My mother was wearing a white caftan, holding a glass of wine. My father was laughing, his arm around Brianna. The ocean behind them was a brilliant, mocking turquoise. The caption read, Family Sailing Day. So grateful for these moments. Blessed wedding week paradise. I scrolled down. 2 days ago, the day of my surgery, a photo of a lobster dinner. Caption, eating good tonight. 1 day ago, when I was in the ICU, a video of Brianna trying on her reception dress, spinning in a circle while my mother clapped. There was nothing about me. No, pray for Olivia. No, emergency trip home. No, sad news. To the world, I did not exist. I was a glitch in their perfect narrative, and they had simply edited me out. I looked at the photos, and I felt a coldness settle in my bones that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. It was a clarifying cold. It froze the confusion and left only a sharp, jagged understanding. I was not their daughter. I was an accessory they had left in a drawer because it didn't match their outfit for the trip. They look happy, I said. My voice was flat. They are monsters, Tessa spat. No, I said, locking the phone. They are just them. I slept again after that. I woke up when the sun was down. The room was dark, lit only by the glowing monitors. Tessa was asleep on a cot in the corner. But Frank was awake. He was reading a newspaper under the small reading light. My phone, which was sitting on the tray table, suddenly lit up. It vibrated. Once, twice, then again, and again. It began to buzz aggressively, walking itself across the plastic table. I reached out and picked it up. 87 missed calls. The number on the screen was Dad, but he wasn't calling to ask how I was. I knew that because the texts started rolling in, one after another, creating a cascading list of panic. Pick up the phone. Olivia, answer me. We need to talk. Now. Do not sign anything with Grandpa. I am serious. Olivia, call me immediately. It is a matter of family security. If you sign anything, you are ruining this family. There was not a single, are you in pain? Not a single, did the surgery go okay? Not a single, we love you. Just demands, just fear. He is blowing up your phone, isn't he? I turned to Frank. He had put down his newspaper. He was watching me over the rim of his reading glasses. He says I shouldn't sign anything, I said, showing him the screen. He says I am ruining the family, Frank sighed. It was a long, rattling sound that seemed to come from the bottom of his lungs. He stood up and dragged his chair closer to the bed. They know, Frank said quietly. Know what? Frank reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out the yellow envelope, the same one he had held like a shield during my graduation, the same one he had clutched in the emergency room. He placed it on the tray table between us. "Your grandmother," Frank began, his voice thick with emotion. "She was a smart woman, smarter than me, definitely smarter than your father. She saw things, Livy. She saw how they treated you, even when you were little. She saw how Brianna got the new bike, and you got the hand-me-down. She saw how they looked at you like you were a staff member, not a child." I stared at the envelope. "Grandma died 10 years ago." "She did," Frank nodded. "But before she died, she did something. She sold the land she inherited from her folks in Montana. It was a lot of land. Livy. Developers wanted it bad. She got a good price." He tapped the envelope. "Everyone thought she spent it," Frank said. "Scott thought she gambled it away or donated it to the church. He was furious when the will was read and there was no cash left, but she didn't spend it." Frank opened the clasp of the envelope. He slid out a stack of papers. They looked old, but well preserved. On top was a handwritten letter in cursive script that I recognized instantly. "My dearest Olivia." "She set up a trust," Frank said. "The Sarah Parker Freedom Fund. She made me the trustee. The rules were simple. The money was to sit there, growing, untouched, until the day you graduated from college, not high school, college. She wanted to make sure you had an education first." He looked at me, his eyes intense. "It is yours, Olivia, all of it. It is enough to buy a house, enough to pay for medical school if you want, enough to never have to ask them for a dime again." I felt the tears finally prick my eyes. My grandmother. She had seen me, even from the grave. She had been protecting me. "But that is not why your father is calling," Frank said. His voice dropped, becoming harder. He pulled another document from the envelope. This one looked newer. It was a photocopy of a bank ledger. "About 4 years ago, right when you started college, your father's consulting business took a hit," Frank explained. "He was desperate. He needed liquidity. He went to the bank to get a loan, but his credit was shot." I remembered the conversation in his office, the scanner, the loan reaffirmation papers. "He used the trust," I whispered. "He stole the money." "No," Frank said. "He couldn't steal it. I have the only key to that account, and I would sooner cut off my hand than give it to him. But he did something else. He forged documents claiming that he was the trustee. He used the trust's future value as collateral to secure a massive personal loan. A loan to pay for the house, the cars, and this wedding." Frank pointed to the photocopy. "The bank thinks the trust is his asset, but now that you have graduated, the trust legally transfers to you, automatically. The bank is going to send the transfer papers to you, not him, and when they do, they are going to see that his name was never on the title." The realization hit me harder than the headache. "That is why he wanted me to sign those papers last week," I said, my voice shaking. "The insurance papers, the housekeeping papers." "Exactly," Frank said. "He was trying to get you to sign a retroactive document making him the co-trustee. If you had signed that, you would have validated his fraud. You would have made yourself liable for his debt." I looked at the phone, still buzzing on the table. "Don't sign anything." He wasn't trying to protect me from a bad deal. He was trying to stop me from claiming what was mine, because the moment I claimed it, his house of cards would burn to the ground. "He is terrified," Frank said grimly, "because if the bank finds out he pledged assets he didn't own, that is not just a fine, Livy. That is bank fraud. That is federal." I looked at the text messages again. The desperation made sense now. The 87 calls. He wasn't calling a dying daughter. He was calling a witness who was about to accidentally send him to prison. "So," I said, looking up at my grandfather, "what do we do?" Frank leaned back in his chair. He looked tired, but for the first time in days. He smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile. "He needs your signature to cover a lie bigger than this hospital," Frank said. "And right now, you are the only person holding the pen." He reached out and turned my phone over, silencing the buzzing. "Let him ring," Frank said. "He has had his vacation." Now it is time for him to come home and face the music. The door to my hospital room did not open with the frantic energy of parents rushing to see their dying child. It opened with a confident, rhythmic click, followed by the sound of expensive leather shoes on linoleum. It had been 6 days since I collapsed. 6 days since they boarded a plane to the Caribbean while I was being wheeled into surgery. And now, they were here. My mother, Diane, entered first. She was wearing a white linen pantsuit that was completely wrinkle-free, a testament to first-class travel. Her skin was a deep, bronze tan that you can only get from spending 40 hours lying on a beach chair. She looked healthy. She looked radiant. She looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine ad for a luxury resort. Behind her came my father, Scott. He was wearing a polo shirt tucked into beige chinos, his face flushed not with emotion, but with the remnants of island rum and sun. And trailing behind them was Brianna. My sister was checking her phone as she walked in her left hand. She swung a large, crinkling bag from a duty-free shop. It clinked softly bottles of liquor or perfume. She had stopped to shop on her way to the intensive care unit. The moment my mother saw me, she launched into a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "Oh, my baby!" she cried out, her voice pitching up into a theatrical wail. She rushed toward the bed, her arms outstretched, her eyes glistening with tears that seemed to appear on command. "Oh, Olivia, we were so worried. Look at you." She reached for me, intending to envelop me in a hug that would likely smell of airport lounges and hypocrisy. "Don't," I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a flat, cold command. I didn't even flinch. I just stared at her with the remaining eye that wasn't swollen shut. My mother froze inches from the bed. Her arms hovered in the air, awkward and rejected. "Olivia, sweetie, it's Mom. We are here now." "I see that," I said. 6 days. It took you 6 days. "The flights were a nightmare," she protested, pulling her hands back and clasping them over her heart. "We tried to get back sooner, but everything was booked. There was a storm system over the Gulf. We were frantic. Olivia, absolutely frantic." "Frantic," I repeated. I looked at Brianna, who was leaning against the wall, looking bored. "Is that why you were posting photos of lobster dinners and catamaran cruises? Because you were so frantic?" My father stepped forward, clearing his throat loudly. He tried to project an air of authority, the patriarch taking control of the situation, but I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. His eyes were darting around the room, not looking at my bandages, but looking for something else. "Now, Olivia, let's not do this," Scott said, his voice dropping to a condescending soothe. "We are all under a lot of stress. Social media is not real life. We were trying to keep up appearances for the wedding guests. You know how people talk. We were suffering in silence." "Suffering in silence," I scoffed. A sharp pain shot through my temple, but I welcomed it. It kept me sharp. "You were drinking mimosas while Dr. Evans was drilling a hole in my skull." "We are here now," Scott said, dismissing my trauma with a wave of his hand. He looked at Tessa, who was sitting in the corner, her arms crossed, glaring at them with the intensity of a sniper. Then he looked at the empty chair where Grandpa Frank usually sat. Frank had stepped out 10 minutes ago to get coffee. "Can we have a minute alone?" Scott asked, gesturing toward Tessa. "This is a family matter. We need to speak with our daughter privately." Tessa began to stand up, her instinct to obey authority kicking in. But I reached out and grabbed her wrist. My grip was weak, but the intention was iron. "She stays," I said. "Olivia," my mother sighed, looking at Tessa with thinly veiled annoyance. "We have family business to discuss. Tessa can wait in the hallway." "Tessa was here when my brain was bleeding," I said, my voice rising slightly. "Tessa held my hand when I woke up. Tessa is family. You are just relatives. She stays." Scott's jaw tightened. He looked at his watch, then back at the door. He seemed agitated, like he was on a timer. "Fine," he snapped. "If you want an audience, fine. Look, Olivia, I am glad you are okay. Really. But we have a situation. He didn't ask about the prognosis. He didn't ask if I could see. He didn't ask when I could come home. We have a situation. What situation? I asked, feigning ignorance. Scott reached into a leather satchel he had brought with him. He pulled out a blue folder. It was thick. It looked official. Since you were incapacitated, he began, choosing his words carefully. I realize that our financial affairs are a bit of a mess. With the wedding next week, and now these medical bills which are going to be astronomical. By the way, we need to make sure our assets are liquid. He placed the folder on the tray table, right on top of my untouched Jell-O. I need you to sign these, he said. He pulled a pen from his pocket and clicked it. It is just a reaffirmation of the family trust structure. Basically, it just says that I am still the primary trustee until you turn 25. It allows me to manage the funds to pay for your surgery and the wedding. I looked at the folder. The label on the front read, Successor Trustee/Loan Reaffirmation Agreement. You want me to sign over the trust? I asked. Grandpa said the trust Grandma left me matures when I graduate. That was 3 days ago. Scott's face went pale. Grandpa? You have been talking to Frank. He has been here, I said. Since the minute I fell. Frank doesn't understand high finance, Scott said quickly, his voice pitching higher. He is a construction worker. Olivia, this is complicated estate planning. If you do not sign this, the accounts get frozen. We won't be able to pay the hospital. Do you want to be responsible for bankrupting us right before your sister's wedding? Just sign it. Liv, Brianna spoke up from the wall. She shifted her weight, the duty-free bag clinking. God, why do you have to be so difficult? It is just a signature. It is not like you're losing anything. Dad just needs to move some money around. I looked at my sister. You know about this. I know Dad is stressed out because you are holding everything up, she said, rolling her eyes. Just sign it so we can go. I have a dress fitting in 3 hours. The cruelty of it took my breath away. They weren't just negligent. They were predatory. They had walked into a recovery room, bypassing the quiet please signs, not to offer comfort, but to extract a resource. I won't sign it, I said. Olivia, my mother warned, her voice turning sharp. Do not be selfish. Your father has worked his fingers to the bone for this family. The least you can do is trust him. Trust him? The door to the room opened again. My father turned around, annoyance written all over his face. We are in the middle of a private, the words died in his throat. Grandpa Frank walked in, but he wasn't wearing his wrinkled suit. He was wearing a clean button-down shirt and slacks, and he wasn't alone. Walking beside him was a woman who looked like she was carved out of granite and ice. She was tall, wearing a sharp gray power suit. Her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. She carried a briefcase that looked like it cost more than my car. I knew who she was. Grandpa had told me she was coming. Who is this? Scott asked, stepping back. Hello. Scott? Frank said. His voice was calm, almost cheerful. I see you made it back. Nice tan. Dad, who is she? Scott pointed a shaking finger at the woman. The woman stepped forward. She did not smile. She did not offer a hand to shake. She placed her briefcase on the empty chair, snapped the latches open, and looked Scott dead in the eye. Mr. Parker, she said. Her voice was smooth, professional, and terrifying. My name is Marin Holt. I am the attorney representing Mr. Frank Parker and, as of this morning, your daughter, Olivia Parker. The color drained from Scott's face so fast it looked like a magic trick. He looked at the lawyer, then at the blue folder on my tray table, then back at the lawyer. Lawyer, Scott stammered. We don't need lawyers. We are family. That is a matter of opinion, Marin said. She picked up the blue folder Scott had tried to make me sign. She flipped it open, scanned the first page, and let out a dry, humorless laugh. Interesting. A retroactive appointment of trusteeship and a collateral reaffirmation clause. She looked up at Scott. You are trying to get her to co-sign a loan you took out 4 years ago, Aren't you? That is private business, Scott shouted. Lunging for the folder, Frank stepped in between them. He was 78, but he was a wall of muscle. He shoved his son back with a single hand to the chest. Sit down, Scott, Frank growled. You have no right, my mother shrieked. This is harassment. We are leaving. If you leave, Marin said calmly, not even looking up from the documents, I will have the sheriff's deputies waiting in the lobby to serve you with a subpoena for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. My mother sat down on the edge of the bed, her mouth open. Brianna dropped her duty-free bag. A bottle of expensive tequila shattered inside, the smell of alcohol filling the room instantly. What is she talking about? Scott? My mother whispered. Nothing, Scott yelled. She is bluffing. It is just a misunderstanding. It is not a misunderstanding, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. You used my trust fund, the one Grandma left me. You used it to secure a loan for your business because you were broke. Scott looked at me, his eyes wild. I didn't steal it. I leveraged it. I was going to pay it back. I just need time. And that is why you need the signature, Marin interjected. Because the trust matured 3 days ago, the bank is about to transfer the title to Olivia, and when they do, they will realize that the collateral you pledged, the collateral you claimed was yours, was never yours to give. The bank will call the loan, and since you cannot pay it, they will look at the paperwork and see you forged the trustee status. I did it for us, Scott screamed, looking at Diane and Brianna. I did it to pay for the house, for the cars, for this damn wedding. Do you think money grows on trees? I have been juggling this for years. So you decided to sacrifice me, I said. I wasn't sacrificing you, Scott pleaded. He moved toward the bed, his hands shaking. Olivia, please, if you just sign the paper, it buys me 5 years. I can fix it. I can pay it back. Just sign the paper. If you don't, I go to jail. Do you hear me? Your father goes to jail. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had missed my graduation, the man who had ignored 87 calls while I was bleeding, the man who had told me I was independent, so he wouldn't have to spend a dime on me, while he drained my future to pay for his country club membership. I looked at my mother. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Scott with horror, not because of what he did to me, but because the money might be gone. I looked at Brianna. She was staring at the puddle of tequila on the floor, looking annoyed that her shoes were getting wet. You knew, I said to Brianna. She looked up, startled. What? You said, it is just a signature. You are not losing anything. You knew he had already spent it. You knew the money wasn't there. Brianna flushed. Dad told me he borrowed a little. He said he would put it back after the wedding gifts came in. It wasn't a big deal. Olivia, you don't even like money. I don't like money. I laughed, and it hurt my head, but I couldn't stop. I worked double shifts at a cafe while you planned a destination wedding. I walked to class because my car wouldn't start. And you think I don't like money? Stop it, Scott shouted. Olivia, listen to me. We are family. You cannot let a stranger, he pointed at Marin, destroy us. Sign the paper, please. He held the pen out to me. His hand was trembling so bad the pen was vibrating. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at the bandage on my arm where the IV was taped. I just had brain surgery, I said slowly, enunciating every syllable. I was in a coma 3 days ago. I almost died. I looked up into my father's eyes, and you came here straight from the airport not to see if I was alive, but to get a signature. The room went deadly silent. The only sound was the beep of the heart monitor, steady and strong. I am not signing it, I said. Olivia, get out, I said. You ungrateful little... Scott lunged, but Frank was there instantly, grabbing him by the collar of his polo shirt and shoving him back toward the door. She said, get out, Frank roared. The anger he had been holding back for a week finally exploded. Get out before I kill you myself. Marin picked up the blue folder and dropped it into her briefcase. I will be filing for an immediate audit of the trust and a restraining order regarding the assets, she said to Scott's retreating back. Expect to hear from my office by tomorrow morning. Scott stumbled into the hallway, his face a mask of ruin. Diane followed him, sobbing. Not for me, but for herself. Brianna looked at me one last time, sneered, and stepped over the broken glass and tequila to follow them. The door swung shut. The silence that followed was heavy. But it wasn't empty. It was the silence of a bomb that had finally gone off, clearing the air. Frank stood by the door, breathing hard. Tessa was crying silently in the corner. Marin turned to me. Her expression softened. Just a fraction. You did the right thing, Olivia, she said. I leaned back against the pillows. My head was throbbing. My body was exhausted. But for the first time in my life, I felt light. The weight of their expectations, their neglect, and their lies was gone. I know, I whispered. I am finally independent. The screaming had stopped. The room was no longer a battlefield of raised voices and flying spittle. It had transformed into something far colder and much more dangerous, a conference room. My father, Scott, stood near the foot of my bed, his chest heaving, his face a mottled map of red rage and white fear. My mother, Diane, was dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue, looking at the floor. Brianna was text messaging furiously, likely complaining to her bridesmaids that her day was being ruined by my medical drama. But I was not looking at them. I was looking at Marin Holt, the attorney. I want to see everything, I said. My voice was quiet. It did not tremble. The pain in my head was still there, a dull, rhythmic thumping, but it felt distant now, separated from me by a wall of icy clarity. If you want me to sign anything, I want to see the paper trail, all of it. Olivia, there is no need for, Scott started, his voice adopting that familiar, condescending tone. Show her. Marin interrupted. She did not ask. She ordered. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. She laid them out on the rolling tray table, organizing them with precise, manicured movements. This, Marin said, pointing to a document with a gold seal, is the original trust instrument established by your grandmother, Sarah Parker. It is an irrevocable trust. That means the terms cannot be changed by your parents, or even by you, until specific conditions are met. She looked at Scott, who was sweating through his polo shirt. The trust was designed to bypass your parents entirely, Marin explained. Sarah did not trust them to manage it. She appointed Frank as the trustee until you graduated from university. At that moment, the legal title transferred to you, solely to you. But I have been managing the family assets, Scott argued, wiping his forehead. I have been taking care of everything. I just need to consolidate the accounts. You have been managing your assets, Marin corrected. And apparently, you have been trying to manage Olivia's too. Frank stepped forward. He placed a smaller stack of papers on the table. They were photocopies of checks, old checks, some dating back 15 years. Look at these, Livy, Frank said gently. I picked up the top one. It was a check for $500, dated 12 years ago. The memo line read, Olivia's dance camp. It was signed by Frank Parker. On the back, it was endorsed by Scott Parker. I never went to dance camp. I wanted to go. I begged to go. But my parents told me we couldn't afford it. They told me I had to be understanding because Brianna needed braces. I picked up the next one. Olivia's math tutor, $500, endorsed by Diane Parker. I never had a tutor. I stayed up until 2 a.m. teaching myself calculus from YouTube videos because my parents said a tutor was a luxury. I sent money every month, Frank said, his voice thick with suppressed rage. For both of you, Brianna got her money, she got the car, she got the private lessons. But every check I sent for you, they deposited it into their joint account. I looked at the stack, thousands of dollars, years of support that I never saw, years of being told we were tight on cash while they siphoned off the help that was meant for me. I looked at my mother. You told me we couldn't afford a prom dress, I said. You made me buy one from a thrift store, and you had just cashed a check from Grandpa for $300 meant for me. Diane looked away, her face flushing. It all goes into the same pot. Olivia, we feed you, we house you. It is expensive to raise a child. You cannot nickel and dime us over checks from a decade ago. It wasn't a pot, I said. It was a funnel, and it all went to Brianna. That is not true, Brianna snapped, looking up from her phone. I worked for my stuff. You have never had a job in your life, I said. Enough, Marin said, cutting the air with her hand. The past misappropriation is a civil matter we can address later. Right now, we need to secure your future. She placed a single document in front of me. It was clean, simple, and typed on heavy bond paper. This is a limited power of attorney, Marin said. It grants me and your grandfather the legal authority to make medical and financial decisions for you while you are recovering. It explicitly revokes any prior implied authority your parents might have claimed. It locks them out of your medical records and freezes any bank accounts with your name on them. Scott's eyes widened. If you freeze the accounts, the bank will panic, Olivia. Do not do this. If they see a freeze, they will call the loan immediately. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy in my weak hand. I am not signing your loan reaffirmation, Dad, I said. I signed my name on Marin's document, Olivia Parker. The letters were shaky, but legible. I am signing this, I said, handing the paper to Marin. You are fired, Dad. You are not my manager. You are not my banker. And as of right now, you are barely my father. You little bitch, Scott hissed, stepping forward. Hey, Frank barked, stepping in front of me. Watch your mouth. She is ruining us, Scott shouted, losing control. Do you understand what happens next? The audit, the investigation. They will look at everything. Exactly, I said. I want a forensic audit. I want to know where every cent of my grandmother's money went. I want to know how you used my social security number. I want to know why I have a credit score I never built. Scott looked like he was having a heart attack. He gripped the back of a chair, his knuckles white. My mother, sensing the ship was sinking, decided to change tactics. She burst into fresh tears. She threw herself onto the foot of the bed, careful not to wrinkle her linen suit. Olivia, please, she sobbed. We can start over. We made mistakes. Yes, we were overwhelmed. But we are a family. Do not let money destroy us. We can fix this. We can pay it back slowly. She looked up at me, her eyes wet and pleading. How much is in the trust, anyway? She asked softly. Is it enough to cover the immediate margin call if we just use a little bit, just to calm the bank down? We can replace it next year. How much is it? 200,000 more. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at her with a profound sense of pity. She was begging for her life, but she couldn't help but calculate the payout. It does not matter how much it is, I said, because you are never going to touch a penny of it. The door opened again. A young man walked in. He was tall, handsome in a generic way, wearing a polo shirt that matched my father's. It was Chase, Brianna's fiancé. He looked confused, holding a bouquet of flowers that looked like they had been bought at the hospital gift shop. Hey, Chase said, looking around the room. The nurse said I could come in. Is everything okay? I could hear yelling from the elevator. Chase, Brianna said. Jumping up, she rushed over and grabbed his arm. Everything is fine. Olivia is she is confused from the medication. She is being hysterical. I am not confused, I said. Chase looked at me, then at Scott, who was pale and shaking, and then at Marin, who looked like a shark in a suit. We need you to talk sense into her. Chase, Scott said, desperate for an ally. She is refusing to sign the paperwork to release the funds for the wedding. She is trying to sabotage Brianna's big day because she is jealous. The funds? Chase frowned. I thought you said the wedding was fully paid for. You said the transfers were done last month. They were, Scott said quickly. This is just back-end liquidity. It is complicated. I just need her signature to satisfy a bank compliance issue regarding a loan I took out against her trust." Chase stopped. He pulled his arm away from Brianna. He was an investment banker. He knew what those words meant. "You took out a loan against her trust?" Chase asked slowly. "Without her knowing, it was a family arrangement," Scott insisted. "And now you need her to sign a reaffirmation." Chase looked at Marin. "Is that a retroactive collateral agreement?" "It is," Marin said smoothly. "And since Olivia just refused to sign it, the bank is going to discover that the original collateral was pledged fraudulently. That means the loan is in default, and since Mr. Parker here doesn't have the cash to cover it, he is facing potential criminal charges for bank fraud." Chase took a step back. He looked at Brianna. "You told me your dad was liquid," Chase said. "You told me the house was paid off." "It is," Brianna cried. "Well, mostly Chase. Baby. It doesn't matter. Daddy will fix it. Just tell Olivia to stop being a brat." "Stop being a brat," Chase repeated. He looked at me bandaged, pale, hooked up to monitors. Then he looked at Brianna, who was more concerned with her reception than her sister's brain surgery. "I think I need to make a phone call," Chase said. "Chase, don't you dare walk away," Brianna shrieked. "I am not walking away," Chase said, his voice cold. "I am calling my lawyer, because if your father used fraudulent funds to pay for the deposits on the venue, my name is on those contracts too. I am not going down for this." He turned and walked out of the room. "Chase!" Brianna screamed. She ran after him, her heels clicking frantically down the hallway. Scott watched them go. He slumped into the chair, defeated. "You happy now?" he whispered. "You destroyed your sister's wedding." "You destroyed it," I said. "I just turned on the lights." Scott put his head in his hands. Then, predictably, he turned on my mother. "This is your fault," he muttered. "You and your trips, you and your renovations. I told you we were overextended. I told you we needed to cut back. My fault," Diane gasped. "You are the one who said you had it under control. You are the one who said the trust was a bottomless pit we could borrow from. You told me Frank was too stupid to notice." "I never said that." "You did. You called him a senile old fool." "Get out," Frank said. He didn't shout. He just stood there, a solid wall of integrity in a room filled with rot. "Get out of this room," Frank repeated. "Both of you. Go chase your son-in-law. Go chase your bank manager. But you are done here." Scott stood up. He looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes, only hate. "You are dead to me," he spat. "Good," I said. "Then you won't mind if I change the locks on the house, since technically, according to the documents Marin found, the down payment came from my trust too." Scott flinched as if I had slapped him. He grabbed Diane's arm and dragged her out of the room. The silence returned, but this time, it was peaceful. Marin closed her briefcase. She looked satisfied. "That went well?" she said dryly. "Better than I expected," Frank agreed. He sat down in the chair Scott had vacated, claiming the space back. "There is one more thing," Marin said, turning to me, "and this is the part that is going to hurt them the most." "What is it?" I asked. Marin pulled a final piece of paper from her pocket. It was a photocopy of a specific page from my grandmother's trust deed. "Your grandmother was very specific," Marin said. "She knew your parents well. She included a clause, Section 14, Paragraph B. We call it an absence clause." She handed me the paper. I read the highlighted text. "If, upon the date of the beneficiary's graduation from an accredited university, the parents or legal guardians of the beneficiary fail to attend the ceremony without a documented medical emergency, or if they fail to provide immediate emergency support during a medical crisis occurring within 48 hours of said graduation," I looked up at Marin, my eyes wide. "What does it mean?" "It means," Marin smiled, a shark smelling blood, "that by going to St. Lucia and by ignoring the hospital's calls, they triggered a penalty clause. The trust doesn't just transfer to you, it triggers a clawback mechanism." "Clawback," It means the trust has the legal right to recover any funds previously distributed to the parents for the care and maintenance of the beneficiary if negligence is proven, and it automatically removes them from the board of the Parker Family Foundation. Frank chuckled. It was a dark, rumbling sound. The foundation, Frank said. That is where Scott hides his tax money. That is his piggy bank. Not anymore, Marin said. As of the moment you collapsed on that stage and they didn't pick up the phone. They lost control of that too. You own the foundation now. Olivia. I looked at the paper. My grandmother had predicted this. She had known that one day. Their selfishness would be so absolute, so undeniable, that it would require a legal failsafe. So, I said, letting my head sink back into the pillow, they didn't just lose their free piggy bank, they lost their own safety net. They lost everything, Frank said. And they did it to themselves. I closed my eyes. The pain was still there, but for the first time in 23 years, I didn't feel heavy. I felt weightless. Do it, I told Marin. Trigger the clause. Take it all. 2 weeks after I was discharged from the hospital, I went back to school. It was not the grand return I had once imagined. There were no marching bands, no stadium crowds, and no 3,000 people cheering. The university, in a gesture of kindness that I had not expected, organized a small, private make-up commencement in the Dean's Conference Hall. It was an intimate affair, meant for the students who had missed the main ceremony due to illness or family emergencies. I walked into the room wearing my black gown. It felt looser now. I had lost 8 pounds in the hospital, underneath my mortarboard cap. My head was still wrapped in a light bandage, hiding the angry stapled line where Dr. Evans had opened my skull to save my life. My legs were shaking, but this time it was not from weakness. It was from adrenaline. The front row was occupied. Grandpa Frank sat in the center, looking like a king in his best Sunday suit. Next to him was Tessa, holding a bouquet of yellow sunflowers, my favorite. They smiled at me, a warm, grounding anchor in the room. But across the aisle, separated by 5 feet of empty space that felt like a canyon, sat my parents and my sister. Scott and Diane were there. They were not smiling. They were fidgeting. They looked like defendants waiting for a verdict. They had not come to see me graduate. They had come because Marin Holt, my attorney, had sent them a formal legal notice stating that the final disposition of the Sarah Parker Trust would be read immediately following the ceremony, and their attendance was mandatory for the discussion of future liabilities. They were there because they thought there was still a chance to salvage the money. They thought that if they showed up, clapped at the right times, and played the part of the contrite family, I might crack. I might sign the papers to save them from the bank fraud investigation that was looming over my father's head like a guillotine. Brianna was there too, sitting next to her fiancé, Chase, but the distance between them was noticeable. Chase was sitting with his arms crossed, staring straight ahead, refusing to look at her. The dean stood at the podium. He was a kind man with silver hair and a soft voice. "We are here to honor the resilience of our students," he said, looking directly at me. "Olivia Parker, you were interrupted during your speech. We would be honored if you would finish it now." I stepped up to the microphone. The last time I had stood here, I had been terrified of fainting. Today, I felt a strange, vibrating strength. It was the strength of someone who has already hit the floor and realized that the ground is solid enough to push off of. "Thank you, Dean," I said. My voice was clear. No tunnel vision today. I looked at the small crowd. I looked at Frank. And then, I looked directly at Scott and Diane. 2 weeks ago, I began, abandoning the index cards I had written months ago. I stood on a stage and talked about success. I talked about hard work. I talked about the future. But I didn't know what I was talking about. The room went silent. I thought success was about grades, I continued. I thought it was about making people proud. But when I fell down when the lights went out, I learned the truth. Success isn't about who claps for you when you are standing. It is about who catches you when you fall. I saw my mother flinch. She adjusted her silk scarf nervously. I learned that family is not defined by blood, I said, my voice hardening. It is defined by action. It is defined by who picks up the phone when you are dying, and it is defined by who is more worried about a signature on a bank loan than the heartbeat of their own child. Scott's face turned a deep, ugly shade of purple. He started to stand up, likely to interrupt. But Marin Holt, who was standing in the back of the room, stepped forward. "Thank you, Olivia," Marin said, her voice projecting with courtroom authority. "That was beautiful. And now, as agreed, we will proceed with the reading of the legal addendum to the Sarah Parker Trust." The ceremony was over. The trial was beginning. Marin walked to the front of the room and placed her briefcase on the table. She did not sit down. She opened a folder and pulled out a document that looked old. The paper slightly yellowed with age. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," Marin addressed my parents. "You are here because you believe that, despite recent events, you still retain some control over the Parker Family Foundation and the associated assets. You believe that Olivia's refusal to sign the loan reaffirmation is a temporary tantrum." "It is a misunderstanding," Scott grunted. "We just need to clear up the paperwork." "There is no paperwork to clear up," Marin said coldly, "because you triggered the absence clause." "The what?" Brianna asked, looking confused. "Sarah Parker was a woman of foresight," Marin said. "She knew that her son," she gestured to Scott, "had a tendency to prioritize his own comfort over his daughter's well-being. So, she included a specific provision in the trust. I will read it now." Marin lifted the paper. "If the parents of the beneficiary fail to attend the graduation ceremony of the beneficiary without a valid medical excuse, or if they fail to provide immediate emergency assistance during a life-threatening event coinciding with said graduation, the following penalties are immediately activated." Marin paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Penalty 1, she read, "the control of the Parker Family Foundation and all its charitable assets is immediately stripped from Scott and Diane Parker and transferred solely to the beneficiary, Olivia Parker, and the primary trustee, Frank Parker. This ban on their involvement is to last for a minimum of 10 years. Scott stood up so fast his chair tipped over. "You can't do that," he shouted. "The foundation pays my salary. That is my job. I am the director." "Not anymore," Marin said calmly. "You are terminated, effective immediately. And since you used foundation funds to pay for your personal travel to St. Lucia, we will be filing a report with the IRS regarding misuse of nonprofit funds." "Penalty 2, Marin continued. Ignoring Scott's sputtering, an independent forensic audit will be triggered for all accounts associated with the beneficiary's Social Security number. Any loans, lines of credit, or mortgages taken out in the beneficiary's name without her explicit, notarized consent are to be flagged as identity theft and reported to the federal authorities." "Identity theft!" Diane shrieked. "We are her parents. You cannot arrest us for borrowing money to feed our family." "You borrowed $300,000 to pay for a country club membership and a destination wedding," I said, stepping forward. "That is not feeding the family, Mom. That is feeding your ego." "And finally," Marin said, pulling out a small, sealed envelope. "The payoff." She held it up. It was handwritten. "Sarah left this letter," Marin said. "She instructed Frank to give it to Olivia only if this specific clause was triggered," she said, and I quote, "If Scott and Diane are sitting in front of you now, it is because they need something. Read this to them." I took the letter from Marin. My hands were trembling, but I opened it. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was my grandmother's looping, elegant script. I began to read aloud. "Dear Olivia, if you are reading this, I am so sorry. It means I was right. It means that on the most important day of your life, your parents were somewhere else. It means they chose themselves, as they always have." I choked back a sob, but I kept reading. "I know your father. Olivia, I know that right now. He is probably angry. He is probably telling you that he did it for the family. He is probably asking you to sign a piece of paper to save him from a mess he created. Do not do it. I looked up at Scott. He was pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He will tell you that you owe him. I read. He will tell you that you are ungrateful, but you owe him nothing. The money in this trust is yours. It is your freedom. Use it to run. Use it to build a life where you do not have to beg for love. And Scott. I paused, looking directly at my father. Mom wrote a note for you too, I said. I read the final line of the letter. Scott, you were always good at spending money that wasn't yours. I hope you are just as good at earning it, because as of today, the bank is closed. I lowered the letter. The room was silent. Even Brianna had stopped texting. This is insane, Brianna whispered. She turned to Chase. Baby, tell them this is crazy. Tell them they can't do this. We have the wedding next week. If Dad loses the foundation, who is going to pay the caterers? Chase stood up. He smoothed down his shirt. He looked at Brianna, and for the first time, I saw the veil lift from his eyes. He didn't see a beautiful bride. He saw a sinking ship. There isn't going to be a wedding, Brianna, Chase said. What? Brianna gasped. What are you talking about? The invitations are sent. I cannot marry into this, Chase said, his voice disgusted. I sat here and listened to your father try to bully a brain surgery patient into signing a fraudulent loan document. I listened to your lawyer outline 10 years of embezzlement. And now I find out you knew about it. You knew he was stealing from your sister. I didn't know it was stealing, Brianna pleaded, grabbing his hand. I just thought it was family money. It was her money, Chase said, pulling his hand away. I am sorry, but I am not going to tie my finances, or my reputation, to a family that treats their own blood like a disposable resource. He turned to me. I am sorry, Olivia, Chase said. I should have said something sooner. Good luck. And then he walked out. Chase, Brianna screamed. She collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Daddy, do something. He is leaving. Scott didn't move. He was staring at the floor, the reality of his ruin finally settling in. The foundation was gone. The salary was gone. The bank was coming for the house, and the daughter he had exploited was standing over him, holding the keys to the only lifeboat he had left. You won, Scott whispered. His voice was hoarse. Are you happy? You destroyed us. I didn't destroy you, I said. I just stopped saving you. I turned to Marin. Execute the audit. Send the files to the district attorney. If they committed fraud, let them face the consequences. Understood, Marin said. Scott and Diane were escorted out of the building by campus security not long after. They didn't scream. They didn't fight. They walked out like ghosts, stripped of their pretenses, stripped of their power, and finally, stripped of the daughter they had never really wanted. I stood in the quiet room with Frank and Tessa. It is over, Frank said, putting a heavy hand on my shoulder. Grandma would be proud. She would, I said. 1 month later. The dust had settled. The investigation was in full swing. My parents were forced to sell the house in Briar Glen to cover their legal fees. Brianna moved into a small apartment with 2 roommates, forced to get a job as a receptionist because her influencer career couldn't pay the rent. I used the money. I bought a small house near the campus for myself. I paid off Tessa's student loans as a thank you for saving my life, and with the bulk of the foundation's assets, I renamed the charity. It was now the Second Chance Scholarship Fund. It was dedicated to students who had no family support, students who had to work 2 jobs to survive, students who needed someone to believe in them when their own parents didn't. I sat on my front porch, watching the sun go down. My head still hurt sometimes. A reminder of the day gravity tried to take me, but I was still standing. The day I collapsed on that stage was the worst day of my life, but it was also the best, because that was the day I learned who my family really was, and from that moment on, I stopped asking for permission to live. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that hospital bed to where I am now, but I hope it reminds you that sometimes you have to cut the anchors to stop the ship from sinking. I would love to know where you are listening from. Are you in the US, the UK, or somewhere else entirely? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this story of justice served, please subscribe to the channel Leona Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help share this story with more people. Stay strong, and never let anyone make you feel like you are less than you are.